Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, coming to you live from the Firstpost studios. First, let's take a look at the headlines. India and the European Union sign a historic free trade agreement after 2 decades of negotiations. Prime Minister Narendra Modi says that the trade deal will boost manufacturing in India and also expand service-related sectors in the country. China promises to provide Cuba with support and assistance in the face of repeated threats from the US, which weeks ago removed Havana's ally Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. Milan's mayor says that US immigrations and custom enforcement officers set to support security operations at the Winter Olympics in Italy are not welcome. Spain's historically high unemployment fell below 10% in the fourth quarter of last year for the first time since 2008. Spain is the European Union's fourth largest economy. And a major heatwave in southeast Australia stokes bushfires, forces hundreds to evacuate and hits record temperatures, with Melbourne seeing its hottest day in nearly 17 years. Hello and welcome. Our top story is from Nigeria. The country's military is back in the spotlight. Several officers are set to face trial. This for allegedly plotting to oust President Bola Tinubu last year. Back in October 2025, 16 military officers were arrested over reported issues of discipline. Coup plot allegations surfaced in the local media. Then the government denied it. But now the military has made a U-turn and acknowledged the coup plot.
The Armed Forces of Nigeria wishes to inform the general public that investigations into the matter have been concluded. The findings have identified a number of the officers with allegations of plotting to overthrow the government, which is inconsistent with the ethics, values, and professional standards required of members of the Armed Forces of Nigeria. Those with cases to answer will be formally arraigned before appropriate military judicial panel to face trial.
While no date has been set for the trial, it also remains an unknown how many of the 16 arrested soldiers will face trial. But if found guilty, the officers could face the death penalty. The trial highlights a growing rift between the Tinubu government and the military. Shortly after denying the coup plot last year, Tinubu reshuffled the country's top military brass. He fired the Chief of Defence Staff, Christopher Musa, along with the Navy and Air Force chiefs. However, Musa has since come back as the defence minister.
I have approved changes in the hierarchy of our armed forces to further strengthen Nigeria's national security architecture.
Now, Nigeria has faced multiple coups between 1966 and 1993, though the country has been under unbroken civilian rule since 1999. Its history has made allegations of coup plotting highly sensitive. And this trial over the latest coup plot comes at a crucial time. Nigeria is facing multiple security threats and its military is stretched thin on all fronts. The military has been fighting a long-running insurgency against Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa province in the northeast. Meanwhile, it has been tackling criminals and communal violence across the northwest and central states. Now, looking at the wider region, there has been a surge in coups and attempted coups in West and Central Africa. Juntas have taken over Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and most recently Guinea-Bissau. Meanwhile, Benin was able to foil a coup attempt late last year. Experts say that the military takeovers follow a pattern. It includes disputed elections, constitutional upheaval, security crises, and youth discontent. Looking at Nigeria, the country's security woes have been escalating. Plus, Nigeria's cooperation with the US in targeting the Islamic State in the country's northwest has also been under scrutiny. The economic challenges and worsening hardship has also fueled public dissent. Nigeria is on edge as security crises, economic pressures and military tensions converge. Can President Bola Tinubu's government stay coup-proof, or are more challenges ahead? Well, joining us to explore this story further is Chike Chude, an African affairs analyst, joining us live from Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome to Firstpost Africa.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. I'd like to look firstly more broadly in Nigeria. Does this attempted coup provide a snapshot into whether President Tinubu might be losing his grip on power?
Well, it might not be so much as him losing a grip on power, but I think it's more of his inability to deliver on what they tend to describe as the so-called dividends of democracy. I think it has gotten to a level where people no longer are able to distinguish between perhaps the responsibilities of civilian government or the democratic setting. And so, if, for instance, in your background, you were talking about the specie is that the basis for these coups are laid by the country's, so-called democratic leaders. The issue of extension of tenure elongation in some instances. And we have that even within some West African countries. And these are countries that have said that they are against military coups, but they laid the foundation for these coups in the first place. And then the insecurity, again, is another issue that you highlighted in your report. And then the misgovernance, the general misgovernance and the crass corruption that is taking place, within the polity of these countries. So these are the things that lay the template for the crisis of governance. And it is this crisis of governance that emboldens some of these military adventurists to venture into forceful takeover of a civilian, government. And the reality, is that we all agree that military government or governance is an aberration to democracy. But the political leadership needs to do more to show the people the reasons why they should not embrace military adventurers once they, come to power. You can see in countries like Guinea, Mali, and some of these other countries where the military has, taken over. You see the rejoicing on the streets, the happiness of the people in welcoming the military purchased. Now, that's an abnormal situation, because the normal response should be that of, anger, that they have truncated the democracy. But then the question people will ask is, what manner of democracy are we practicing? So the government, of Bola Tinubu, obviously, we might not say that it's losing grip of the country, but in the midst of, continuous attacks in many parts of this country, continuous kidnap of citizens, and the inability of the army to stem the tide of insecurity, it is not too much of an imagination to believe that the government is beginning to lose grip of the territory of this country. And so it is not good for the optics what is going on in the country. And that's why, this kind of a situation would even arise in the first place. Google, the best antidote against military incursion in power is good governance. Because when you have good governance, then the military run out of...
Yes, so Chike, I just want to jump in. Apologies to interrupt. I want to look at optics, as you've mentioned. And one area where there is some confusion is this U-turn that the government has done. Why did they deny a coup plot and then later have now announced that there was one?
I mean, they were denying something that was obvious to everybody. I'm sure almost every Nigerian knew that there was a coup, attempt, and they said so. Of course, apart from social media, even the traditional papers, that you will think that maybe the government might be able to influence to come down on the story. All of them kept on running the stories of the military coup because the attempted coup, because everybody knew that it was true. Now, why did the government refuse to acknowledge it? I don't know. I'm not in the minds of the government, but we can only come up with the theories as to why they did that. I think they were embarrassed. The government must have been embarrassed that in spite of all of the what they have been telling Nigerians about the achievements in the economy, and there's so many areas of our national life, that a group of people could actually show dissatisfaction with the way the government is being run, and then actually attempt to take over the government. And again, at that particular point in time, at the initial stage, I think the military authorities had not gotten enough information about the motivation for the coup, the people that were involved in the coup, the direction of the coup. And so perhaps they felt it was safer, to actually deny it while they, quietly do the investigation into the coup itself. But I think it was bad because people saw the government as people that were living as a government that is in denial. Since, like I said, it was already known to a lot of Nigerians that a coup had actually taken place. So this admission by the government now is not something that people are impressed with.
OK, and Chike, to finish, let's look finally at the situation, of course, in the wider region. Junta leaders have come in and they've tried to crack down on terrorist activity. Given the current security situation in Nigeria, is there some instance where potentially a military takeover could be beneficial for the wider security situation?
Well, I think it's complex. Obviously, the militaries of these countries are the ones engaging the terrorists and the bandits. And they are the ones in the front line. They are the ones that are suffering the heaviest casualties, against when they confront these dangerous non-state actors. So perhaps they also might not be too happy with the way the civilian governments under, which they operate have been responding to the issue of insecurity, and they think that they might be able to do a much better job. But I think it is easier said than done because a lot of damage has already been done to the security fabrics of some of these countries. So by the time the military takes over, immediately they are confronted with two issues at the same time: the issue of governance and consolidating in the government that they have just taken over, and then the immediate issue or the urgency of providing security for the nation state. So these are some of the issues, and I think that it perhaps in a way it might have also formed part of the reasons. I'm not saying it's 100% with 100% sureness, but it might have formed part of the reasons why they actually took place. Undertook coups, because they felt that perhaps they'd be able to do a much better job against the insurgency, against the terrorists, than the civilian governments, have been doing. And so it's not been easy, even for them, even in places like, Mali, Burkina Faso, and the rest. They have not been able to deal decisively with these jihadists and some of these terrorists and bad non-state actors. So it's a different kettle of fish, actually, confronting the insecurity in those places. But I believe that they are doing their best. It's just that somehow their best has not been enough. We've gotten to a situation where most of these countries need foreign help, some kind of foreign intervention, some foreign help, because they seem to lack the capacity and the ability to be able to stem the tide. Maybe they're also in need of air power, intelligence, surveillance equipment, and the rest. So it's not been an easy situation for them, even when they take over from the civilian government.
Yes. Chike Chude, thank you ever so much for joining us on Firstpost Africa.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Moving on now. US President Donald Trump's crackdown on Somalis living in Minnesota is escalating. A second federal shooting in Minneapolis over the weekend has fueled public anger and intensified backlash. Immigration raids have also fueled grassroots activism in Minnesota, which is home to around 80,000 Somali Americans. Last month, Trump deployed around 3,000 federal agents in Minnesota. The deployment, following arrests and violence, have filled the air with fear and panic. Democrats and community leaders have accused the agents of harassing peaceful protesters, racial profiling, and searching houses without warrants. The uncertainty over what might happen next and the constant anxiety has united the Somalis living in Minnesota. Over 100 volunteers have been patrolling South Minneapolis, distributing Know Your Rights pamphlets, escorting scared elders, and training people on how to oppose ICE raids. According to local leaders, mosques and neighbouring community centres in Minnesota are now turning into political education hubs. Some of the Somali leaders have also claimed that raids are an attempt to suppress the Somali voter turnout before the midterm elections in November.
I think a big part of what's going on is that Minnesota is a blue state, and it's a backlash against that, using the Somali fraud situation as an excuse to get involved. But it's a time to be proud to be Minnesotan.
Well, Trump has launched sweeping attacks on Somalis. He has called them garbage and claimed they should return to their country, which he described as having no functioning government. Trump has also accused Somalis of being involved in $1 billion welfare fraud. One of the most high-profile members of the Somali community is Ilhan Omar. She is a congresswoman who was born in Somalia. Omar is a frequent target of what many see as racist attacks by Trump.
A major investigation is going on with respect to the massive $20 billion plus welfare fraud that has taken place in Minnesota and is at least partially responsible for the violent, organized protests going on in the streets. Additionally, the Department of Justice and Congress are looking at Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who left Somalia with nothing and is now reportedly worth more than $44 million. Time will tell all.
From ending temporary protected status for Somalis to putting Somalia on the US travel ban list, Donald Trump has left no stone unturned in making his hostility towards Somalis crystal clear. The American approval ratings of Trump's immigration policy has fell to its lowest level since his return to the White House. And one of the reasons for that has been his antipathy towards Somalis. Can grassroots activism help the Somali community stand up against Trump's crackdown? If yes, to what extent and for how long? Mali, one of Africa's largest gold producers, is making a move that shifts control of its mining economy. For the first time, Bamako is taking the driver's seat in a critical link of its gold supply chain. And China is agreeing to play along as their junior partner. Mali has reportedly secured a 51% controlling stake in a China-backed industrial explosives joint venture. The project is supported by Beijing Auxin Chemical Technology, a Chinese state-owned firm specializing in mining and civil explosives. The structure is simple. Mali holds the majority, China holds 49%. Analysts say this is not about ownership on paper. It is about control over what keeps Mali's mines running. Industrial explosives are essential for gold and lithium extraction. Without them, mining stops. And for a country heavily dependent on mining revenue, experts say control over explosives equals leverage. Until now, Mali relied on imports of explosives. Foreign suppliers from France and South Africa dominated the market. Any supply disruption meant production slowdowns or full shutdowns of the mines. But analysts say the new deal with China changes the balance. The Farachiko facility is designed to supply all 30 of Mali's industrial mining operations. Construction is expected to take about 12 months. If successful, Mali could eliminate a major import dependency and position itself as a regional supplier to neighbouring states. Analysts say that ownership structure is unusual in Africa's resource sector, as Western mining companies have traditionally resisted minority positions in strategic operations. This shift comes as Mali resets its economic and security relationships. Since a 2021 coup, the country has stepped back from traditional Western partners. The country has moved on from Canadian mining company Barrick Gold, who controlled most of Mali's mines before 2023. French forces have withdrawn from Bamako's diplomatic relations with much of the West, remain strained as Mali is sanctioned by the US and the EU. Analysts say these pressures have pushed Western investment away. In its place, new actors are stepping in. Russia on security, China on infrastructure, and also industry. And this is where the story widens beyond Mali. Across the Sahel, states are reasserting control over strategic resources. In Niger, uranium contracts have been revised, reducing French influence and increasing Russian involvement. In Burkina Faso, mining rules are being rewritten as the state moves towards greater ownership and oversight. Analysts say the pattern is consistent in a region long shaped by external control over internal wealth. Sahel states are now pushing to set the terms themselves. For Mali, this deal is about more than explosives. It is a signal that Bamako wants the final say over its resources, and in a Sahel where power is increasingly contested, that control may prove more valuable than the gold itself. And for our final story, Trump's targeting of African nations through tariffs and travel bans have been no secret. But could his hardline policies be pushing countries in the continent away from the US and towards a bloc he fears more than most? That group is BRICS, and the latest country pursuing membership is Zimbabwe. But is there a risk the move risks frustrating Trump at a moment of global instability? Harare is intensifying efforts to join the BRICS group of nations as quickly as possible. The aim is to solidify a deeper integration into the global economy at a time where Trump's tariffs have impacted Zimbabwean exports. By securing membership to the group, Zimbabwe aims to unlock a host of benefits, including preferential trade agreements, increased foreign investment amid a more stable and regulated environment, and greater access to advanced technological expertise. Officials say they want the admission to be fast-tracked and have been in contact with BRICS member nations.
Zimbabwe is ready to integrate more deeply into the global community, and joining blocs such as BRICS is very important for us in expanding our economic involvement and integrating Zimbabwe into the global economy. We have formally approached all BRICS member states, and we are looking forward to participating in BRICS in the categories that are allowable within the framework of the bloc.
Now, this intent from Zimbabwe comes at a time of geopolitical tension, trade disputes, and policy division among Western powers. A big driver for that has been the return of US President Donald Trump, which has seen the weakening of long-established frameworks. And against this backdrop, BRICS is being viewed as a more stable option for cooperation, especially among developing nations. Currently, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa constitute the core and founding members of the BRICS bloc. Other members include Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. But Trump has made his position on BRICS clear. Many of his geopolitical foes are in the group, and the US president has taken a hardline stance against the alliance, notably in the African continent against the Ramaphosa governments in South Africa. More broadly, he has threatened 10% tariffs on BRICS countries, citing what he called anti-American policies. While BRICS leaders have largely maintained a defiant stance, Zimbabwe have had to weigh up the benefits of joining the bloc versus any potential kickback from the US for joining the group. And currency plays a huge part in this. Zimbabwe, which has struggled with theirs for years, share a similar goal with BRICS, the ability to trade without a reliance on the US dollar. Harare has implemented a foreign exchange buffer to phase out widespread use of the dollar within just 3 years. BRICS has talked about a unified currency to counter the US dollar for years. Leading BRICS member China has also looked to Africa as a proving ground for internationalizing the yuan, and Zimbabwe has attracted hundreds of Chinese investors in infrastructure and mining projects in the country. This all signals a step away from Western and notably US influence in Africa. So, Zimbabwe is looking to join BRICS at the earliest opportunity, strengthening their position amid global instability. Benefits to trade that could counter US tariff action. But Trump will be watching, and his response could influence Zimbabwe in the short term, even if the BRICS move comes at the speed Harare wants. Well, that's it on the show for us today. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thank you for watching. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Live, where we bring you the day's top 4 stories from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. Let's begin with the headlines. North Korea fires what appears to be a ballistic missile towards the